Tonight we begin with development that U.S. defense officials had tracked, debated, and quietly prepared for, a development that unfolded not over months, but in a single day that raised military alert levels, a single day that shifted naval positioning in the region, a single day that forced commanders to reassess long-standing assumptions. What Iran's military posture signaled today crossed a line that regional deterrence strategy had hoped would hold. And when that line blurred, the United States Navy did not hesitate. They responded with precision, speed, and unmistakable visibility. For months now, there have been signals, not official statements, not formal declarations, just signals, that Iran was preparing something unusually coordinated. Iran has long been confrontational, yes, but it has also been calculated in its confrontations. Its moves typically follow a certain pattern, a rhythm, almost a script. Rhetoric, regional proxy pressure, naval shadowing. But what set off alarm bells in U.S. Central Command this week was that the pattern went silent. Experts who monitor regional military activity know the indicators: the missile unit repositioning, the drone activity patterns, the naval fast boat dispersal, the sudden communications lull. All of that went quiet. And whenever Iran goes quiet, it often means something is about to get loud. Early morning, U.S. surveillance assets detected what analysts described as coordinated maritime and missile force readiness activity, including radar systems activating along Iran's southern coast that had not been online in this configuration in over a year. These are the kinds of military postures Iran only adopts when signaling something very specific: deterrence, intimidation, or a test of response. Observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Iran was shifting its military posture. And when a regional power shifts posture without explanation, even by a small measure, Washington pays attention. The response issued by the Pentagon tonight was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Defense officials, after a high-level security meeting, described Iran's movements as deliberate, unstable, and, perhaps most importantly, designed to probe U.S. limits without triggering open war. But that strategy only works if the target hesitates. The U.S. Navy did not. In fact, their response was among the most visibly coordinated we've seen in the region in years. Within hours of the initial detection, U.S. forces adjusted carrier strike group positioning. These weren't ordinary maneuvers. These were defensive readiness deployments, systems and assets the U.S. only activates when preparing to counter high-risk threats tonight. Defense sources confirmed that the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group shifted into a heightened defensive formation, supported by Aegis missile defense ships and airborne surveillance. This included positioning against coastal anti-ship missile coverage zones that analysts believe Iran has expanded in recent years. The U.S. moved before Iran could escalate further. They adjusted air patrol routes. They strengthened electronic warfare coverage. They repositioned escort destroyers, likely meant to counter missile or drone swarms. In other words, the U.S. targeted the threat architecture, not Iran itself, the components that would make a surprise strike viable. This is what made the situation urgent. Iran's posture wasn't just symbolic. It was actionable. It represented the kind of position that could threaten even a powerful vessel if left unaddressed. And the U.S., understanding that fully, responded with force, but controlled force, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't escalate offensively. They didn't strike preemptively. They reinforced defense. They strengthened deterrence. And here's where the story becomes even more intense. Analysts now believe Iran's move may have been designed to test the reaction speed and defensive layering of U.S. naval power after years of evolving missile and drone technology. Iran wanted to see whether the U.S. would respond cautiously. But instead, the opposite happened. U.S. forces didn't pull back. They demonstrated readiness so visible, so immediate, that even Tehran would have noticed. You don't get Washington's full attention easily. But this did. Military analysts speaking anonymously described Iran's behavior as calculated brinkmanship, a way to pressure without firing a shot. But the U.S. response proved they remained both alert and adaptable. Their actions were not only rapid, they were layered so precisely that multiple defensive systems overlapped in coverage. That matters because it shows preparation. It shows the U.S. Navy is not a passive target. It is an active shield as reports continue throughout the day. We learn more about the scale of the U.S. response. Carrier-based aircraft expanded surveillance arcs, forcing wider awareness across the Gulf. Guided missile destroyers adjusted positions to guard against anti-ship missile trajectories. Electronic warfare units reportedly increased monitoring of drone control frequencies. This wasn't just repositioning. This wasn't just caution. This was layered deterrence. And layered deterrence is the one thing Iran has struggled to overcome. For every advance in missile range or drone numbers, the U.S. has countered with systems that complicate targeting. Remember, Iran has long believed that aircraft carriers are vulnerable to saturation attacks, that numbers can overwhelm defense, that proximity favors coastal missile forces. But reality has often proven more complex. Carriers operate with escorts. Defenses are layered, and detection usually comes before impact. What makes this moment so delicate and so dangerous is that Iran's move comes at a time when its leadership faces internal pressure and regional competition. Hardliners want strength. Regional rivals want weakness. Proxies want support. The public wants stability. Leaders balancing those pressures sometimes make risky displays, not from confidence, but from vulnerability. The U.S. statement, now shared through defense channels, signaled that Washington is not willing to allow destabilizing maneuvers to go unanswered. Officials said Iran's actions were inconsistent with responsible maritime behavior. That's diplomatic language for, we see what you're doing and we're ready. Meanwhile, U.S. leadership addressed the public in a measured, firm tone. They emphasize readiness. They emphasize deterrence. They emphasize that escalation is not the goal, but preparedness is essential. These are not casual remarks. They are signals meant for both allies and adversaries. What makes the situation more concerning is that Iran's posture wasn't isolated. Along with coastal activity, regional proxy rhetoric increased. Naval patrol patterns shifted. Drone testing reportedly intensified. When multiple pieces move at once, it suggests coordination. Analysts see several possibilities. Iran may be preparing leverage for negotiations. It may be attempting to project strength domestically, or it may be testing whether carrier power still dominates modern missile warfare. But today, the U.S. signaled that the answer is still yes, with conditions. And tonight, for the first time in weeks, Iran's coastal networks have gone quiet. Too quiet. And when things go quiet, it usually means planning is underway. Because today, Iran may have learned three things. Detection comes fast. Defense is layered. And carriers do not sail alone. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The USS Abraham Lincoln remains operational. Deterrence still holds.